Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kaya Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of Kick Butt Heroines and Delicious Men in Dark Romantic Worlds. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a USA Today #1 Amazon best-selling author who's known for her swoon-worthy heroes and her sassy, smart heroines. We are talking to the one and only Bella Matthews. How are you today?
Hi, Kaya. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to come and have this amazing conversation with us because you have been kicking goals lately and I want to hear all about it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's been a crazy year, that's for sure.
Let's start from the start then. When did you start publishing and why?
So I published my first book 4 years ago this past November. So 4 years ago last month. And I am 21 books deep. I'm working on book 22 right now. And it was actually, I'm one of the few people that can say I was lucky enough to be able to have something good come out of COVID for me because I had been I always say a rabid romance reader, not even an avid romance reader. I was rabid. I needed the next book. My romance journey really started. I laugh because it's almost cliche. It's like so many of us got back into romance with 50 Shades of Grey, and that was me. I had two small children at the time. I was pregnant with my third, I think, or I might have just given birth to my third. And I was home on maternity leave, and I picked up the first book. And when I was home on maternity leave, my kids are each 2.5 years apart. Kid number two was in the process of being diagnosed with autism. I was home for a few weeks with kid number three. When kid number two was diagnosed, I didn't go back to work. We decided, I was going to stay home. I was going to be the one that handled most of the therapies. So I went from this career where I was a VP of sales for a very high level organization. So I was always working and, you know, talking with people. I was very much a people person to being home all the time, and I wasn't used to that. So I needed like an outlet. And my husband is a workout fiend. He's like got the basement gym and everything. And he's like, come work out with me. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not my outlet. I can tell you that. I'll find my outlet. That's not it. And a friend gave me 50 Shades of Grey and was like, I just read this book and I had to Google half the things in it. I'll never forget her saying that to me. She was like, I didn't know what flogging was. And she's like, but it was good. And I was like, okay, bring it on. I think I might have picked up like a Nicholas Sparks or something like that over the years, but I had been a horror genre reader. I was a huge Stephen King fan in my youth. And I was a little romance when I was younger, like teen romance. You know what I mean? And I'm nearly 50. So I was past Twilight. Like that wasn't my romance. That was my romance in my 30s, not in my teens. Um, so I picked up this book and I was like, oh my gosh. And it ended on a cliffhanger. And we're going back. The baby at the time is now 13 years old. So we're going back 13 years. The very first iPad had just come out, and an aunt had given it to us because she was an educator. And she said, iPads are fantastic for children with autism. It can help them communicate. I want you to have this. My kid was 2.5. He had no idea what to do with it because, technology, that was still new in technology. So kids weren't as advanced with it at that point. And I'm looking at this thing going, this book just ended on a cliff. And I have a baby upstairs sleeping, and I'm not making it to Target to get book two until the end of the week. I'm pretty sure I can read on this iPad. I was like, I think I can do like download it or something. And that started the journey. And my husband laughs at me to this day because I was that reader that could read a book a day if I needed to. That was how I decompressed every day. That was getting lost in other people's words and in other people's worlds really was what kept me sane for years. And that kind of slowly transitioned from being a reader to I wanted to be an ARC reader. I didn't want to wait for the books. I was like, how do I get on people's ARC teams? So then I started a Bookstagram account on Instagram because I wanted to be an ARC reader. I didn't want to have to wait for the books. And that kind of was where I dipped my toes into, I always call it Romance Landia whenever I'm talking about it. That's how I sort of dipped my toes into the book world. And that was, I don't know, maybe 2017-ish. And I was really happy with that. I was that person that had like a schedule for all her arcs because I was just so happy. And my husband always said to me, "Why don't you do a podcast or something? You love talking about this. Why don't you do something with it? You smile, you light up, like use that." And I kind of blew him off. And then COVID happened. And at that point, my children were in eighth, sixth, and fourth grade. My oldest and my youngest were, extreme athletes who did a million different sports. And we had a therapist that used to come 4 days a week to my house for my middle son. At this point, I was working a full-time job. I'd gone back to work. So we basically never slowed down. Well, then COVID forced us all to quarantine. So I was in house and I was still working, but my company had slowed down at that point. So I wasn't as busy and we didn't have sports and we didn't have therapy and we just had the homeschooling. And I was like, kid number two broke our laptop. And I looked at my husband and I said, I'm going to order a new laptop. And he said, why don't you get a laptop that you could do podcasts from? He is a podcast guy. So he was always talking about that. And I was like, I don't know. So I ended up getting a used MacBook, like a refurbished MacBook, because I was like, I'm not gonna. We all operate on iPads at this point. Why am I going to spend a fortune on a laptop? Yeah, since then I have every expensive laptop, computer, iMac, you name it, I've got it all. But back then I was like refurbished just fine. And I couldn't tell you why, but the day, I'll never forget it. It was the middle of July at this point. COVID had started in America in March. And well, lockdown had started, I believe, at the end of March. The middle of July, the laptop came in. I charged it. I bought Microsoft Word and I wrote the first four chapters of my book that day, my first book. And it had just been this idea I'd kind of had in the back of my head, and I was so scared to do it. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it until I was halfway through. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my friends. So halfway through, I reached out to my best friend, who was the one that originally said, I just read 50 Shades of Grey. You have to read it. I didn't even know what flogging was. I'll never forget her saying that. So I reached out to her and she knew I arc read for people. And I was like, do me a favor, could you read this? And she was like, yeah, sure. And she read it and she went, ooh, whose book is this? And where can I get the rest? And so I told her what I was doing. And that was probably the end of August at that point. And that was how it all started. I was completely finished with the book by, no, that must have been the end of July. I was completely finished with the book by the end of August. And my favorite part of what I like to call my origin story is at that point, I reached out to this author friend of mine who I knew because I had promoted her debut. Her name was Waverly Alexander. She no longer publishes, but I swear she had such a huge impact on my career because I reached out to her and I said, can I ask you something? Can you point me in a direction? I did this thing and I don't know what to do next. And I'm just like, I'm not even sure where to look for the guidance. Can you tell me where to look for the guidance? And this incredible woman said to me via an Instagram voice memo, which at the time I didn't even know existed. She said, oh my goodness, let me tell you all the things I did wrong so you don't have to do them. She spent 3 weeks. Every time she thought of it, she would voice memo me something else. Look on Fiverr, do this, look for this, don't do this, don't waste your money on this, start to do this. Because as much as I thought I was in the book world. I wasn't. I was completely oblivious. My ops manager still laughs at me because I am so not that person that is all over social media. Compared to especially the way that it is right now, I knew nothing. So had it not been for her, how gracious she was with her time and her experience, I like to think that I would still have been published, but I highly doubt that I would have published as quickly. And I don't think I would have published as successfully. And I definitely wouldn't have had the first experience that I had. So I always like to say I like to pay it forward. If a new author, that I meet somewhere or I'm in contact with says to me, can you help me? I very rarely say no, unless there's a situation where I absolutely can't. Um, I love to feature brand new debut authors in my newsletter. I love to say pop into my group because I truly believe had she not done that, I don't know where I'd be right now. And 4 years later, my entire life has changed.
Yeah, I agree with this in the sense of pay it forward mentality because majority of us have been in that situation where we've had somebody to offer us some kind of advice or guidance. And
Mhm.
I absolutely love that aspect of this community as well, which is a reason why we do this channel in the first place as well. And I'm kind of curious then, after releasing your first book, when did you start noticing the snowball effect? When did you have that moment where you're like, oh, I'm a real author. There's a demand for my books. When was that moment?
Maybe a year ago. That was probably a year ago. I think I spent 3 years expecting like everything just to stop. Um, with each new book, I felt a little bit better. And a little over a year in, I guess it was my first series was 4 books, and I finished that just shy of about 11 months. I finished that series, and I started my next series, which was 3 more books. So five, six, seven. So by the time book 7 was releasing, I was essentially working 2 full-time jobs because my husband and I had spent so long with him being the only one working that I had gone back to work and we had become dependent on 2 incomes. So we were like, okay, we really need to make sure this is going to work before I can consider leaving. This, I was incredibly lucky. I worked for a phenomenal company. It was a wonderful position. And I would write every night. And I wrote full time at night because I knew I needed to see what that would look like before I could quit my day job. So book 7 released and we saw what it could do. My husband and I sat down because we're over communicators and we were like, okay, you know what? It's time. And I gave my manager, who's the owner of the company, I gave him my notice. I'll never forget because the book released in May. I gave him my notice June 1st and said, I'll give you the whole summer because I ran an entire department. I said, I'll give you the whole summer. I will interview my replacement. I will train my replacement, but you've got me until I think it was August 30th. I was like, you've got me till August 30th. And then that's it. I have to step back. So at that point, I sort of felt like a real author, but I still didn't notice a snowball effect until a little over a year later. My first book in my second generation series released a year ago, the beginning of December, The Keeper. And it wasn't the first book to hit the top 100, but it stayed in the top 100 for 10 weeks. And then it fell out for like 2 weeks. And then it hit back in when my next book released. And all of a sudden, the world found me. And I write in one big world. So they're all standalones, but they're in the same world. So people read that book and went, oh, and there's all these other characters. So they went back to book 1. And I think that might have been book 16 at the time. I've never gotten read through the way that I've gotten in this past year. And it took 3 years. Like this was so not an overnight thing. But all of a sudden, on a normal basis, we get DMs or emails or, responses to things now where people say to me, I picked up whatever book they picked up, and it's never book 1. It's always somewhere in the series. And they say, oh my gosh. And then I went back and I just binged your whole backlist. And I'm just like, wow, that's amazing to hear that, to know that somebody just DM'd me today and said, I don't even, they read me so out of order. And then they said, so I just said, wait, I'm going to pause. And they went back to book 1. In 2 weeks, they've binged 21 books because she reread everything she'd already read too. She's like, when's the next one come out? That to me, you can't get a higher compliment as an author than when somebody said something like that to you. It's just such a wonderful feeling to know that, you can, for me, like I said, I loved getting lost in other people's words and worlds. And to know that I can give that to someone is such an incredible feeling.
I love that you have this experience regularly as well. I am
Mhm.
curious about two of your transition points because
Mhm.
when we have exponential growth, it can be very emotionally exhausting, very like sometimes even debilitating. So you had
Mhm.
2 points there. One, deciding to quit your full-time job to go full-time author. That is a tricky
Mhm.
beast in itself, especially for
It
people trying to create
is.
routines or how to do that. So I'd like to know
Mhm.
about but then also how you felt elevating when you started noticing that massive read through coming through. Were
Mhm.
you a little bit sort of imposter syndrome around when that was happening, or were you just like, yeah, fine?
No, imposter syndrome is still around. It is around. For me personally, it really, I get a dose of it almost on a daily basis because I still just feel so lucky because I think I love what I write. I do. But to still constantly have people tell you that they love what you write, and there are so many authors that write incredible stories that people haven't found yet. So to be lucky enough that they've found them, I know there's a lot of things that I've put into place to get where I am, but I also know there's a healthy dose of luck that comes with it. So it's the imposter syndrome with the, oh my gosh, I'm so unbelievably grateful and I don't want to waste this. You never know when the opportunity is going to go away, when the tides are going to change and people are going to want nothing but dark romance, which, I never say never, but I don't write that. Or you know what I mean? Like, so it's definitely that healthy balance of imposter syndrome and I need to make sure that I enjoy this ride because I don't know when the dip's going to come, because the dip's going to come for all of us, and you hope you can ride it out and that you've put enough of an infrastructure in place that you can ride out the dip and then go right back up the hill when it's time. But yeah, that is a scary. It's almost as scary as it is wonderful when people reach out and say like, oh, "This is fantastic! I just did this. I just read the whole thing," and it's a frightening thing sometimes.
Yeah. How did you go when you first went full-time author? What were some of the things that you kind of put into place for yourself that didn't necessarily work, or how it differs to what your day-to-day looks like now?
So for me, I have a bit of a different story because like I said, I gave my notice. I told him my last day was August. My parents lived with my husband and myself and my kids. And my last day with my job was August 30th. My mother started hospice August 1st. So we knew my mother was dying. So I left a job, but I also basically took on the job of caregiver at the same time. So there was no structure. And I thrive on structure. My whole life is built around structure with kids, and my special needs son has autism. Structure is extraordinarily important in our house, and there was no structure. And it was like I had been so looking forward to just being able to focus on writing. And if anything, I was able to focus less on writing than I ever had before. So that was a scary thing. So trying to make sure that I got that time in and having to work through. So that was August 1st. She started hospice. We lost her at Thanksgiving that year, and we lost my father 6 weeks later. So the first 6 months of me being a full-time author and the stress that that brings with it on, okay, now I know, especially because I had a career prior to it. I didn't come to it not, being part of the income that was brought into the household. I knew what I needed to hit. Um, and it was almost debilitating when I would write because I was like, oh my gosh, it was an emotional drain. It was so stressful, and you knew you still needed to do it. But as awful as that sounds, it also taught me that no matter what position I'm in, I can finish a book. I can finish a book if I have to in a week. Not that you ever want to, but like there have been times where life has been crazy and I still got it done and it still got done on time. And like my readers know, because of those 6 months, I used to have arcs out to my street team 6 weeks in advance. Who does that? Now arcs go out like 4 days in advance. And my readers know, like the people that sign up know I'm open and upfront about it. You're going to probably get it the Sunday before release. I release on Thursdays because I haven't quite caught up. I'm catching up with the book that I'm working on now. I expect it to be done earlier. My goal for 2025 is a simultaneous audio release. So I'm trying to get ahead. But when you get that far behind where you're literally finishing and working with your editor, leading up to release that way, it's hard to catch back up because you get burnt out from the time that you put in. And then it's like you got to turn. I have a rapid aggressive release schedule. So you turn right back around and start again. And it's a bit of a vicious cycle. So I really did not get any kind of a great structure in place. It probably took me almost a full year because, like I said, we lost her in November, we lost him in January, and then I had to deal with all of that. And it was a rough year. So then at the end of that following year was when that book hit. So it was almost a year after we lost her that huge hit came, and that was when things started to change again. So it's been crazy, and I would love to say I have a beautiful structure now. I don't. I try, but I don't.
I want to say I'm sorry to hear
Oh,
that.
thank you. I
Um,
appreciate it.
what I on a po- I'm a positive, optimistic type of
Me
person.
too. Me
What I
too.
like about this is that you were in a situation because of your books and because of your career where you really could take that full-time carer, and I absolutely love that.
Hmm.
And I want to know whether there was, besides obviously working your butt off and pushing through so much emotional exhaustion and grief at that time, and then you said at the end of the year is when you really had that book that hit. Was there anything that you had changed for that particular release, or was that just the momentum building up and then it was the start of a new series and finally everything just went
Yeah.
boom for you?
I think it was a lot of what you just said. We didn't change anything really for that series. One of the things I put into place early on, and I don't know that a lot of authors look at it this way, but I think coming from the high level sales background I came from, I bring a lot of business experience into this business. So I look at things a little differently, I think, in some ways than a lot of people. I invested in a team early on. Even when I didn't have the money to invest in a team, I was investing in a team and I was investing in the infrastructure of my business. So by the time we were releasing that book, I had one full-time employee and one part-time employee. And we have been strategizing releases. We we treat it so business like. With each new release, we have like a wrap up afterwards. Okay, what worked? What didn't work? What should we change for next time? What are the tropes that are hitting right now? What do we need to be looking at? We start that within 2 weeks of the last release. We've already done that for my next release, and I released my last book 2 weeks ago. Um, so I had a little bit of a momentum going. The the Keeper was the book that released in December of last year that really started to kind of put me out there. I want to say it was the April before that. I had a hockey book that happened to hit. The character in that book had been planned for a year and a half. He'd been introduced in book 4, and I think he was book like 12, let's say. So he'd always been a hockey player. His book was released during that crazy hockey boom, like a year and a half ago, when hockey was taking over everything, hockey romance. So I lucked out and people started to find me there, but they didn't stick around. They came for the hockey book. It was the first time I ever hit the top 100. I think I hit the top 50 actually with that one. It was the craziest experience because I'd never been there before. I'd always been around like 150 to 250. And then all of a sudden I was like, yes, this is awesome. And then the next book, I think hit like might have hit 92, let's say. And the same thing with the one after it. But all three of those books, or no, the first one did stay a little sticky, not crazy sticky. The next two books hit and dropped out really quickly. And we were like, what are we doing wrong? So that was when we really started to kind of break down everything after the releases to say what worked, what didn't work, what can we try? We were trying everything. Um, and I don't know that we actually changed anything dramatically for that next book. I think it was just the slow build. And then that next book, the book that hit, was also hockey. So I do think that played a part in the success because hockey, I feel like, has been so hot for the last year. And I just so happened, I wasn't tapping into it because it was hockey. These were all planned before that like madness started. So I happened to be, that was one of those right place, right times. And luckily I built everything, put everything in place that what I was going to be putting out was going to be good. You know what I mean? I wasn't chasing the trend. I happened to be capitalizing on it because I was already planning to do it before the trend hit because I plan books almost a year in advance. So I had no idea. And it's really like high level, you know what I mean? It's not plotting by any means. I'll break down like what I think I'm going to write. We've already done it for next year. I have a pretty good feel for what I'm releasing next year. I know probably at least one of the main characters for each book. I have a feel for what month they're releasing and some ideas for tropes, but I see liquid on that because you never know. I do pay attention to what tropes are doing well. So I think it was a lot of things. I think it was that slow build that they found me in April. And some of them kind of paid attention and stuck around. I think a little bit of it was hockey. I think a little bit of it was its second generation. And if you see other romance authors, they tend to do well with their second generation. So that was something that I always kind of had in the back of my head when I looked at strategy. I knew I was building this world and I knew I give everybody babies. So I always said, yeah, I'm going to do second gen one day. And I kind of had debated what direction I wanted to go in, if I wanted to give some side characters a series or if I wanted to go second gen. And I just had this gut instinct that we should go. That
Yeah.
was what I did. And I kind of think it was all of those things rolled into one on top of, I'd spent the last 3 years really trying to get better with each book. So I think it was a really good book. Um, one of my favorite things to write is the My Wife vibes, and I was kind of at the start of that. I feel like that's really hit this past year. I was one of the first ones in that particular time frame, not one of the first ones to write it, but as it was just starting to get big, I was one of the ones that had just written it. So I think I hit the nerve because people were like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't read this in a while. I really like this." And there were just a lot of little factors that kind of all came together. So it stayed sticky, and my team and I sat down and went, "Oh, okay, now what are we going to do to keep it like this, because this is amazing." Because that one hit 17 in the store, and like I said, it stayed in the top 100 for 10 weeks. Like the book I released 2 weeks ago already is out of the top 100. It's going back and forth between like 105 and 95, you know what I mean? And that was 2 weeks ago. So I'm kind of like, okay, what do we need to do? um, One of the other things I did, though, to maintain that, was I took a risk.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about ad spend, and I know it's almost like taboo to talk about how much you spend on things. Ad spend helps. And we sat down, and I never had a tremendous amount to spend on ads. And my husband and I looked at it in December, and it had been in the top 100 for a few weeks at this point. It was actually early January. So it had been in the top 100 for about a month. And we were like, okay, my next book releases in February. If I can keep this book as close to the top 100 as possible, what can that do for my next release? And that was the first time we pulled the trigger and really increased ad spend. And I do think that played a part in it. And I hope that that's not too blunt to say. I don't know if that's appropriate to say or not, but I'm just being honest. That's ad spend is now a big part of my planning process, because ads really help. And I think that that's one of the things authors can really do to help themselves, is continue to try to teach yourself ads. And there's a million classes and you can take them all. And I'm sure some of them are wonderful. I've taken quite a few, and I've taken little bits and pieces from most of them. And I've stuck to what I know and which ad works, which platform works for me. We've tried out quite a few different ones, and I always run ads. I have evergreen ads that constantly stay on. Ad spend's always a big part of my release strategy. And I think that that made a huge difference.
I'm looking at the time like, are we even going to have enough time? Because I have.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, don't apologize.
I
Don't.
can go as long as you need
Oh, good. We might
to.
need some time because I have a lot of questions for you based on that. One thing that I am very curious about, obviously, you come from a high sales job role. And as you were saying, I was kind of curious before you started talking about it as well, is how much of that you've obviously incorporated into your author career, which
Time.
makes sense now as you've said that. So I am very curious as to what advice, and this is my first question out of the many I have for you, but what advice you would give for authors who are trying to elevate their game from a business strategy side, because
Mhm.
it's not innately built into all of us, and we're trying to learn as much
Not,
as we can as we go. So, what advice would
yeah.
you have to offer?
One of my biggest pieces of advice, and like I said in the beginning, I did not come into this career with a ton of extra money to be spent on it. We took money from a savings account to release the first three books. And when we took that money, there was like nothing left in the savings account. I had only recently gone back to work like a year before that, maybe 2 years. I don't even know what it was at this point. So it was a stretch. Invest in a team, even if it's just one person at a time. And even if you can only do a little bit, invest in a team, because I think so many of us think that we have to do everything ourselves. And we can only be stretched in so many directions. And you can only be a master of so many things. You can only be excellent at so many things. Surround yourself over the course of the career, continue to grow it. Surround yourself with people that know the answers that you don't know, and that can do the things that you don't need to be doing. Because the more that you're writing and somebody else is handling on the back end, the whole business falls apart if it's not for the new books. You know what I mean? So investing in a career, or in a career, investing in a team surrounding you, whether it's, if you work with a marketing company. I work with Valentine PR, they're amazing. If you work with an agent, if you have an assistant, if you have, like I said, I have an operations manager, she runs the business. Then I have someone else who helps with our social media and multiple other things. I, Somebody helps me. We have an online store, and I do a ton of paperbacks for my Patreon, a lot of different things, I think we might get a chance to talk about later. So I have somebody at my house helping with getting everything distributed because if I did all those things myself, I'd never release the way I release. And releasing the way I release, I truly think is the thing that has maintained the the trajectory I've had this past year. Couldn't think of the word. The word was there and it wasn't coming out. So I think if you can try to, I'm just going to angle this a little bit because my husband just came down with the ham that the grocery store delivered for Christmas next week, I think. Um, but I think that's always a big thing that I recommend doing because if I had to be the one to do my newsletter every week, I write what's in it, but I'm not the one that puts it all together and figures out who my swaps are that week or things like that. If you invest in a team that's going to be honest with you and not going to yes you. Because someone that's just going to agree with everything that you're going to say isn't helping. You want somebody that's going to push back and make you better. If somebody just sits there and they're a huge fan, which is wonderful, but if they're a huge fan and they're just going to love everything you say and every cover you show them and every storyline, then that's not actually going to help you get better. Where like my ops manager, she started out, we always love to laugh at this story. I went like old school with my first release, and I personally reached out to bookstagrammers by name and said, "This is the title of my book. This is a synopsis, like not the whole thing, but I gave them like a feel for it, the tropes. I would love it if you have time in your schedule to read my arc." This was book one. And she didn't have time at the point. She shot me down. And I appreciated it, and then she must have seen the cover or something. And she got back to me and she's like, you know what, I'm going to squeeze in time. And we didn't know each other. And then she dropped in my DMs after she read it and she's like, that was fantastic. And she reviewed it. And I had gone back and I had read some of the reviews from the first book to try to find beta readers for the second book. And I picked a couple to reach out to that left favorable reviews, but that didn't just, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? That left a good, like, there was a reason behind what they were saying. And she happened to be one of the people. So she started beta reading for me in book two. And so she's been around the entire time. And I can say to her, I have this idea, and she'll listen to it and she'll go, no, that's not going to work. Or, you did that. That sounds like book, blah, blah, blah. So having somebody that's going to give you honest feedback, I think makes a difference too.
100%.
That was
So
a really, I feel like I'm talking too much. I'm sorry.
I honestly appreciate it. Like, I love when authors are completely open and transparent on here. So when you said before, like talking figures is taboo, not on here. Like, we appreciate it. So, and because I think that we need to adopt these conversations, like there needs to be more in it because so many of us want to level up in our career and we don't know what that looks like. So then when we have authors who are kind enough to give us that information, to sort of give us the data or enable us to envision what it may look like for us, it really helps. I am curious, I do like the idea of growing teams and delegation because again, I think it's a conversation that perhaps isn't had enough because we don't know where to go. We don't know how to source people. And as you said,
Right,
you had been in the
right,
wide way that you're
right.
an operations manager. How
Yeah.
many staff members do you have working for you? And what are the main things that you have delegated out? I heard you say newsletter before. I'm assuming you probably have some
Mhm.
social media. You have a PR company as well, which is Valentine's
All
PR.
set. So I have two full-time staff members and then I have one part-time staff member. My operations manager really, in so many ways, is almost a business partner. She really runs so much of the business to let me focus on writing. She Everything that's on the back end goes through her to the point where if somebody emails me something, 90% of the time I'm forwarding it to her. She handles contracts. She handles, if a book box is interested in working with us, she handles my newsletter. Like I said, I write it. She'll shoot me a message and be like, hey, this is what we need to talk about this week in the newsletter. I write it, send it to her. She edits it for me because this is my favorite part of being an author. I can't place a comma to save my life. I never could. If it wasn't for my editor and my team, there would not be a single grammatically correct thing in a book or not. If you ever look at my social media, God forbid, I don't even put commas in because they're never in the right place. It's terrible. But so she'll put it all together for me. She orders the paperbacks. I mean, if it's business related, other than my advertising, so much of it goes through her. Um, I have someone that I do work with cover designers, but I also have someone in-house that does things for us as well in that regard. She helps put together some social media things. She helps with some graphics. She helps with videos. She's kind of like she does. I like to joke around. She's a jack of all trades, and I'm so incredibly lucky because she's actually my cousin's wife, and she graduated with a publishing degree from like Emory University, which is an amazing college. Like she's so much more technically, like she's more qualified than I am. You know what I mean? It cracks me. I have a political science degree. I shouldn't be doing this. I was a salesperson. Like it makes no sense where this is, she should be like a USA Today bestseller, traditionally published. Cracks me. And she's been writing like articles in magazines for years. So she kind of handles a little bit of everything for us. She helps me interface with the people that we order our swag from, with, what do we need? She helps come up with ideas. She helps us stay on top of things that are trending. My operations manager does the same thing as well. They are both very much involved in the day to day of the book world to see what's happening, what's hot, what people like, what we should be doing. But we also don't chase trends. I have stayed true to the same brand for 4 years. If you're going to read a Bella Matthews book, you know what to expect. If you've ever read one before, you know what you're going to get in the next one. And by that, I don't mean the story, but I mean like, what type of romance it's going to be. If you look on my Instagram, it's going to be delicate and feminine. And you know what I mean? Like there's very, I am a brand girl. And I think that's because of my sales background. Like I locked in on that early and I stuck with it. And then I have somebody that comes to my house and does all of the shipping for us for, I have a Patreon and there's different tiers of my Patreon. And so different paperbacks go out to them. I think we just shipped out 1,000 books this week between our Patreon and our shop orders and our TikTok orders. So I have someone that comes to the house part-time a few, different days a week, depending on, it's a very flexible job. So if she wants to work 5 hours today and 3 hours tomorrow, and, she needs off Wednesday, so she'll do 6 hours Thursday, that kind of a thing. But to try to keep us, still a somewhat new position, because we've only really just started to get this big with the shop. My shop's only been open a little over a year, and my Patreon has continued to grow. It's got Patreon's done well for me this year. It's grown leaps and bounds from January to December. So where we used to maybe send out 100 books for a new release, just for the new release alone, I think we just sent out 500 books or something like that, because there's different tiers. Certain tiers get paperback, certain tiers don't. Um, and you choose what tier you want to be. But that's, again, you need the infrastructure in place to be able to do that, because if I had to do that, I wouldn't be writing. And that's my thing is I release every 2 months. For me to release every 2 months, I need this team in place to be able to take care of the back end, or I'd never be able to write. And I was given really good advice very early on from a few different authors that said to me, hire people to do the other things. You're the only one that can write. You're the only one that has your voice. You're the only one that has your words. As you continue to grow, put people in place to take care of the things that you don't have to be taken care of, so you can do what you want to be doing. And what really runs your whole business is the books that you put out there. And you want the quality and you want all these things. So if you want to continue to grow, as you grow, continue to invest in your business. So that's kind of the way that I've done. And it's not an easy thing and it's not a fast thing. This is, I'm over 4 years into it at this point, and I am lucky that I've gotten to do what I've gotten to do. And a lot of that is because of this past year. And it's only been, like I said, Brianna started working for me full time. It's been about a year and a half, I think. Um, I didn't hire my second full time person until this summer. And then I didn't hire that third part time person until this summer as well. And that this summer looked very different than it looks now, because this summer we were kind of just dipping our toes in. A friend of mine is a teacher. She had the summer off and she was looking for work. And I was like, you know what? I could really use somebody to come to my house and help with this. And she's like, oh, that sounds great. So I had her for a few months, but then she went back to school. And I was like, oh, I really need someone else to come in and do this. So, we went and found someone that would work out for us. And it's been a good thing. It's definitely been a good thing because like here, my husband and I trying to find the time to do this because both of the people that work for me full time live 5+ hours away from me. So it can't be their thing. It has to be done in my house to an extent. So my husband and I would, if somebody's taking somebody to sports or whatever, and we're down here at 10 o'clock at night after I'm done writing all day, trying to get these things out. And that was an overwhelming thing. And then that plays on your, or not plays on your, but weighs on your creativity because you're tired and you're stressed. Like these people paid for this. This has to get out. I have to get this done. I'm not a late night person. I get tired and go to bed. Like I joke around all the time because my ops manager's 27. She could stay up till 3 a.m. and she's golden. I am an old lady. I want to be in bed at like 9 or 10 o'clock. Um, so that was never a good thing for me.
Let's talk about then your shop and your Patreon because to be honest, I was equally impressed by both. So your
Yeah.
shop, or when you should I say when you go to your website, I absolutely adore it. You have your shop, you have Bella Rewards, like a point system. It's your website's very informative. You have your links to your Patreon. And so, as you said, you had massive growth when it comes to your sales and your Patreon as well. So I'm kind of curious as to what you've done besides obviously organic reach, whether you have done advertising, whether you have like book box advertising on Facebook, or how did you build both the shop and Patreon? What did you do to?
Social media. Really, I haven't advertised my shop or my Patreon at all. When I advertise, I only advertise ebooks. Strictly, it's Amazon. I take people right to Amazon. So the shop has been a slow growth. I think it's about a year and a half old at this point. Um, and it's been slow, but it's been steady. And it's the more people like what you're doing and the more that you're able to offer them on there, the more they're going to go there. And because it is integrated with my website, people look around. And the Bella Bucks, oh my gosh, I laugh at the Bella Bucks because I didn't name them. That's my ops manager has a history, and I not a history, but she came from IT. So she built the site, she built the shop, she came up with the idea for the Bella Bucks, and she called them Bella Bucks. And I was like, really? Are we really going to call them Bella Bucks? She's like, we are. So that's what we went with. But it was kind of, different things with my Patreon. My Patreon automatically gets, I think, 10% off of any shop orders. So that drives people, to the shop. And you want people to be more comfortable looking around. And we do special editions with each new release. So we offer foiled book boxes with each new release. You can either get just a foiled book or you can get a foiled book box. Like, for instance, with this release, if you get a book box, it's a custom box. It has foiled trope cards. It has the foiled paperback. It has squishy something like I see a pink football over my head. I'm looking to see if I can see it. I have in the next book box coming up, there's like a squishy coffee cup from the bakery in my town. That football has the football team's logo on it. There's always custom artwork in there. There's stickers. We try to have these really beautiful boxes with these things that people would really enjoy. And we do that for every single release. So people know what to expect. I think setting expectations with your readers is really important um, because I think there's almost like a trust factor there. And I think the more somebody trusts you as an author, they're going to trust that you're going to deliver a book that's going to be worth their time. They're going to trust that if you say this book is coming out on this time, it's coming out on this time. I've been lucky enough that I've never had to push a release. If I have put it in stone that this is when it's releasing, then that's when it's releasing. I always put my pre-orders up they're up in time at the back of the last book. You know what I mean? So and typically what I will do is I will put all the pre-orders up for a series and I'll just put them all up for a year in advance because that's as far out as Amazon lets you put them. And if I know those books are going to release within the year, I'll put them all up. So say I were to do it today, I'd put them all up for December of next year. And then I would just update the dates. Usually in the blurb, I'll say this is, book 4 in the whatever series, expected release date June of 2025. So people know. But then you have that link and you can put those links in the back of the book so people can pre-order. Or we always put the shop links in the back of the book. We put the Patreon links. We're very big on sending people places so they can see the different things. They might like it, they might not like it, but there's different things that they can check out if they're interested. But I don't spend advertising money on that at all. My advertising money is strictly on the books.
Yeah. Let's talk about advertising money then, because advertising is very intimidating for a lot of people. It is one of those things that you may choose to delegate out. By the sounds of it, you do it yourself. So
I
I'm
do it myself.
do it yourself, which is incredible.
Mhm.
What were some of the courses and resources that really helped you understand it? And if you are, and if you're uncomfortable by it, you don't have to, but are you comfortable in sharing sort of rough figures, perhaps in what you do, what you might steadily spend, and then what you might spend comparatively on release week?
hmm So I took Sky Warren's, which I don't believe she offers anymore, but I took Sky Warren's Facebook ads course. I took Alessandra Torrey does Inkers Con every year, and I want to say Mal Cooper did an Amazon ads course in that. Someone else did a Facebook ads course in that. I've never taken Brian Cohen's, but I've heard wonderful things about Brian Cohen's. I'm in quite a few different author groups where we all talk about advertise. We talk about a million different things, but I pay attention to what everybody else is experiencing. And I think that's a really important thing is it get yourself into these author groups where people are going to be honest and talk about like the different things like that and pay attention. I try to make sure I'm always learning, but I really took the time to teach myself. And in the beginning, that was $5 a day because $5 a day was a stretch for me over the course of a month when I didn't know if I was going to make it back, when I didn't know if I was going to be doing this 3 months from then, when I didn't know, I think in the very beginning, I might have spent $3,000 on each release between an editor and a cover designer and the things that you needed along those lines. So then to turn around and say to my husband, I have no idea if we're going to break even on this book, but I want to start advertising. And I released my first book in November. I started advertising in February because I couldn't figure out at that point. I remember looking at it. And again, I come at it from a sales background. So I was looking at it going, okay, so that was interesting for a first release. I wouldn't necessarily call it successful, but I would also call it successful because at least I got the book out there. I did it. I didn't break even at that point. But I was like, so what do I need to do? And I kind of sat back and I went, okay, I have to learn ads because I need to figure out how to drive people to the book because I had a Facebook group, but those were the people that had already read the book. So now how do I get people back to that book before the next one comes out? Because the next one was coming out in March. And that was when I started playing with ads. And I started at $5 a day. And that was a struggle for me. It wasn't an easy thing for me to do. And I didn't know if it was going to amount to anything. And that was 4 years ago. And I still fine tune my ads on an almost daily basis because I personally swear by Facebook ads. Facebook ads are my bread and butter. Some other people swear by Amazon ads. We're dipping our toes in Amazon ads right now. I have dipped my toes in TikTok ads. I think I am one of the few authors. TikTok has never done a thing for me. Never. I've tried TikTok ads. I've tried, you name it, we've tried it. I do not attribute any of the success I've seen, and I've been very lucky that I've seen a lot of success in the past year. I don't attribute a single minute of it to TikTok. But I still try it. That's the thing. I don't rule anything out with my strategy for release. Um, I went to RAM, the romance author mastermind that Sky Warren runs. I went to that a few years ago. And I sat there and I can remember listening to an author say, if you want to hit the top 10, you need to be prepared to spend $10,000 in the first week in advertising. And I remember being like, or was it 20,000? It was either 10,000 or 20,000. I don't even remember now. But I remember sitting there saying, holy cow, I'm never going to have that to spend in a week in advertising. So I think it's really doing what you're comfortable with. That's the thing. Start out where you're comfortable and learn. Take the time to learn, even though you're not going to make money probably off of it in the beginning because you're going to have to figure out what works for you because what works for me might not work for you. I've helped a couple of friends try, like I've shown them what I do, and that's all I can do. I don't know all the different ways. I know what works for me. It hasn't worked for them. I have a general rule of thumb. I want to get back 3 to 1. If I'm spending $1, I want to make $3 off of it. I generally run in the beginning before I had such a big backlist. I always ran my very first book because I figured that's the funnel into my world. So for a long time, let's say I spent $100 on the first book in that series and $100 on the first book in another series and like $100 on my newest release, and I would spend $300 a day. And I did that for a very long time. At this point, I'm past that point. Luckily for me, people will go back. So now I really focus more on my newest release, but it's really just there isn't a magic number. Some releases I spend more than others. This past release was, a little bit more expensive for me because it was my turn for Amazon to say, "Hey, we're going to cancel your pre-orders." And even though you have the screenshot that you uploaded on time, and I'm reaching out to my rep saying, "Hey, I have this screenshot. This is the time." They were like, "I'm sorry. Once it's canceled, there's nothing we can do." Even if it's a glitch in the system, it doesn't matter how many pre-orders you had, it's canceled. And now you have to do it as a live release. What was the first time we'd ever had to do that? And ironically, because the book was done, it wasn't me not being ready for it. The book was supposed to come out if it had been pre-ordered on Thursday. The book released on Tuesday because I had it done. I turned around, I was like, so what do I do? I didn't even know how to do a live release. So I put a little bit more behind this one than I typically would because we lost all those pre-orders. And unfortunately, I'm a pre-order person. Like I've heard authors talk about rank over bank or bank over rank. If you want bank over rank, then you put it up for pre-order because you know you're going to get pre-orders. If you're more worried about your rank, you might do a live release because then you're going to push everybody there day of, and that helps your rank more. That's not my style. I would rather capture people when they read my world, um, and know that like, oh, okay, they can pre-order it and then they don't have to worry. They just know it's going to come out. But the catch is, if this happens to you, you don't know how many people just assume that it's been pre-ordered and then they're not going to even know the book released. And Amazon didn't send like a cancellation email because we checked. Nobody got any kind of a cancellation email. So it was a bit of a cluster. So I did spend more this time than I typically do, but that's the thing. You've got to kind of there's no magic bullet. There's no magic number that's going to get you there. Like I said, that last book last year, 10 weeks in the top 100, I have not spent, that was probably the least amount I've spent on advertising in a year. And I've never had a book stay in the top 100 that long since. So it kind of just always, you play around to see what's working. But my advice is start small and start playing as soon as you can because it's trial and error. It's figuring out what's going to work and it's having that tolerance. It could be $3 a day. You're still going to learn off of $3 a day what's working and what's not. And it's I hate to use the term, but it's sucking it up and sticking with it even though it doesn't seem like it's working for 3 months because at some point you're going to find that rhythm and you're going to figure out what works for you and then all of a sudden it's going to work. That's my best advice.
I'm just like, I want to be Bella when I grow up.
You really don't trust me.
I,
Trust me, you don't.
well, I'm feeling very inspired. One thing that I am very curious about is one, your writing process, whether you're a plotter or a pantser, but rapid release. It is a beast in itself, especially maintaining that for 4 years. So, how have you avoided burnout? And I'm assuming a lot of that goes to the team that you have developed on the
Mhm.
side with you as well. But how
Mhm.
to maintain that pace? Is there any particular
Mhm.
conversations or any routines that you have in place
Yeah.
to keep up with yourself?
Yeah. Well, I haven't rapid released for 4 years. I've only been doing that for about a year and a half now. I want to say last fall, I released a book in October, and then I released my next book in December, and I've done every 2 months since December. So it used to be about every 3 months. And honestly, my thought process at that point was I'm an analytics girl. I am a numbers driven person. It's just my personality type. So I look at things as okay, you do really well release month. I usually do pretty good the second month after release. That third month, there's usually the lag. And you hear that across the board from authors. So I sat there and looked at it and went, so what happens if I don't give myself that third month? And I remember having the conversation with my ops manager and my husband, and the three of us talk a lot. Even though my husband has a full-time job, so he's not in the day-to-day actual running of the business, but he's my partner. So we sit down all the time, like I said, over communicators. And the three of us sat down and they both looked at me and went, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I think this is what we're going to try to do. And they were like, they're making the faces, and I'm like, it's worth a shot. But like at that point, and it's one of the things I try so hard to be a glass half full person. And even with the hell that I went through when we lost my parents, I can look back at that time and say that taught me I legitimately edited the book that released that December on the couch while my mother was in a coma. Like I learned what I was made of at that point, and I learned what I'm capable of and what I can work through. And I turned to the two of them because this was maybe like 8 months after we had gone through that. And I was like, listen, I can do this. If I could lose both of them in 6 weeks and never miss a deadline, and I didn't, we lost her. I released a book 2 weeks later. I had already been editing, so it wasn't like I was writing through the hell of it, but and then I dove right into the next book, and we lost him 6 weeks later, and I released that book a month after that on time. It had already been up for pre-order. If I could do that, I was like, I can do this. I know I can do this. I've already proven to myself if I can go through that, I've got this. So it's only been about a year and a half. I don't know that I could maintain this for 4 years, and I don't plan to necessarily maintain this for 4 years. I do plan to maintain this for another year at least. But when I started, my biggest issue is burnout because I'm already, like I said, I used to be done a book 6 weeks prior to release. And now through the editing process and everything. And when I talk about having a great team and surrounding yourself with a great team, one of the most important members of my team after my ops manager and Callie, who doesn't even have a title, she does so much, is my editor, is amazing. My editor, I've been with her since book two. She actually, when I started working with her in book two, she went back and re-edited book one for me. I had worked with someone else. My editor understands my voice. And I felt like she just does a really good job of that. And I asked her if she would re-edit it. Not that the first editor wasn't great, but I found somebody that got me and got my voice, and she doesn't try to change my voice. And I think that's a really important thing because I think sometimes an editor can be incredible, but if they're not understanding your voice, they might not be the editor for you. You know what I mean? So my editor typically will go through it, send it back to me. I'll go through it, send it back to her. She does another round. It comes to me, and then it goes to proofing. We can be proofing up until like 2, 3 days beforehand. Worst case scenario. You know what I mean? Like at this point, I'm trying to get myself ahead, but it's been a trying year because I'm so tired by the time I'm done that I don't usually write for a good 2 weeks. And I'm releasing every 2 months. So those 2 weeks make a huge difference. And then I try to do short stories in my Patreon. So it can get very, well, that's it. You kind of sit there and go, oh my gosh, what? But I also look at it as now's the time to do it because people want it right now. And I don't know 2 years from now if they will. So let me try to enjoy the ride while I'm on it. Um, and for the next year, I plan to continue with the rapid release schedule. But I do think the year after that, I might slowly start to stretch it out, but we'll see. If I can continue the way I am, who knows? But it's hard balancing that. And I don't even want to say having a life because I don't really have a life. I have kids. It's hard balancing that. And, my oldest is a senior in high school. My youngest plays very high level soccer. We're going to be traveling halfway around the world this year for soccer. So it's the balancing of all of that and the balancing of signings and things like that. So, but I do, like I said, I like structure. Trying to have it is kind of hard, but I do like it. And I do try to get up. I do try to start to write at a certain time. I get my admin, I call it my admin things off my desk first. I always go through like check emails, even if it's forwarding it to someone else. I check the emails. I go through that. I'm a checklist girl. I don't know if you can see them. I have all these notebooks over here because I'm still a hand writer. I like to write things out. I have notebooks like there's, a gazillion different notebooks sitting right next to me. This is like the one this is my daily to-dos. Right. Where's my plotting one? This is my daily to-dos. This is the plotting for the book I'm writing. This is the plotting for the short story I'm writing. Underneath of it is my calendar because I do use the online calendar too, but I like to be able to write things down. I'm
Are we
crazy.
the same person at this
Right,
next?
exactly. I do. And we've got the joint calendar. The whole team has access to the joint calendar, but I still like to write it down. Um, So like I try to stay on top of it, but I do most of that stuff in the morning because for me, I'm not usually very creative in the morning. I tend to be more creative later in the day. Early afternoon seems to be my sweet spot, and then I can go for a few hours. But I do like to hit, whatever. I have an idea every day of what my word count needs to be for the day. I try to hit it. I try to be pretty good about it. Doesn't always happen. Um, but I'm a pantser. You did ask that as well. I wish I was a plotter. God bless the people that are plotters that can like figure it all out ahead of time. I have a friend like that. She can plot before she starts a book, she plots out chapter by chapter. I have no idea. I know where I'm going to start it. I know what my midpoint's going to be ish. I know how I think I want it to end. And then again, my ops manager and I will sit there and I will bounce all my ideas off of her. Like this is what I think I want to happen. And these are the tropes I'm going for. And what if we did this? And we do that multiple times throughout the book because I kind of let gut instinct drive me. So that might mean I start one way thinking I'm doing one thing, and then I'm going to go with it. If I get an idea and I think it's way better, I change it on the drop of a dime. This past year, I met a reader of ours who started doing a little bit of not like work for me, but she was helping with some videos at one point, and she has a master's in psychology. And I forget how we started talking about it, but she did a character for me for one of my characters, and I was like, Morgan, this is the greatest thing anyone has ever done. She now does a character analysis for my hero and my heroine before I start every book. And when I tell you how much that informs their arc, or like kind of makes me feel better about the things I'm thinking, because most of the time at least one of my characters has been introduced previously. So she's met them, she's read them. Because I write in second gen, she's usually met them multiple times and she knows their parents. So she'll sit there and I mean, she'll do like full blown. I can't show this because this will show you who the hero is, but this whole thing is one character analysis and it's phenomenal. Um, and that's been a huge help at the start of each book when I go to sit down and figure out the arcs. So that was a very roundabout. I don't know that I even answered your question. I feel like I just like babbled on and on and on.
Honestly, I am absolutely loving this interview. I would love to know what is the big goal that you are chasing? What is the dream that you're after for your author career?
I still want to be doing this when I'm 70. I want to be doing this on a beach when I'm like 70 years old on vacation with my husband. I want to be able to whip out a computer while he's sleeping and we're on vacation in like Jamaica. And, I'm more the morning person than he is. I want to be sitting on like a porch with a cup of coffee, watching the ocean while he's sleeping, writing my next romance book. That really is like my ultimate. I want the longevity of that. Um, and I hope I'm still lucky enough to be in a position to do it because, like I said, I think a lot of it is skill and a lot of it is structure and determination and sheer will, but a lot of it's luck too. And I truly believe that. Like, yes, it's all the other things, but if you're lucky enough to write the right book at the right time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a better author than, John Smith. It just means people actually saw you and your book and you got the opportunity that you got. So don't squander it. That's how I look at it for myself. Like I was lucky enough that people found the book. And yes, I think, the books that I've written are hopefully well written. And I love what I put out there and I stand behind everything I've put out there. But who's to say that the person standing 3 rows away from me didn't write something even better that nobody ever got a chance to read? So I refuse to squander the opportunity I've been given. And I just hope to be able to continue to do it. That really is like the ultimate goal for me.
I love that. I do have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. I've lit a candle, I've created ambience, but
Love
basically
that.
what it is five rapid questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Amazing. What are the three words that best describe you?
I am kind. I like to think I'm confident and I'm caring.
I love that. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
I broke my nose in a swimming pool.
Oh, how did you do that?
Somebody fell on my face, believe it or not. They literally fell on my face. Like I turned around, bumped into somebody, took a step back, and somebody else was jumping into the pool and nailed me and broke my nose.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I was like 18 years old. So, sheer mortification of being a teenager bleeding into a swimming pool in a bikini. It was lovely.
Oh my
Lovely.
goodness. I love it. I hope you're gonna write that into a book. That's gold.
I know, right? That is gold. I should. I should definitely do that.
What is the song that best describes you?
Forever young. I
Oh,
really want to be able to just enjoy life, remember what it's like now, and still be kind of living it like that 30 years from now.
yeah. On that topic, can we just actually add how you don't look like you're almost 50 as well?
Oh, thank you. I totally
That's
am. I'm about Valentine's Day. I'll be 47. So trust me. I wish I wasn't, but it is.
wild. Um, what is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
I'm a classically trained singer. I've auditioned on Broadway. Yeah, I don't use it anymore, but my voice was my first instrument before I ever started writing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What, or should I say, who has been your favorite character to write and why?
Oh, so probably actually Easton Hayes, or this is a tie between Easton Hayes and Callan Sinclair. Easton was the keeper of the book that I, released last December. Callan was the book that hit number one this October, and they both have very similar traits where they had my wife's vibes and they had these moments of utter devastation where they showed vulnerability I don't know that we often get to see in our heroes. I love to write alpha males that are so amazingly alpha, but when it comes to their heroine, like the world, they will drop down to their knees. You know what I mean? And I love to bring them to their knees in a really scary way. And those two had it in spades, and it was so much fun. That's my favorite thing to write.
I have had so much fun having you on today. So let us know what we need to be on the lookout for, what's coming out, and most importantly, where do we find you?
Thank you so much. I've had such a great time talking to you. The next book releasing is called Captivating. It's releasing February 13th. It will be on Amazon, and I cannot wait. You can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Audible. You can find me on my website. We have a Patreon. There are plenty of places to stalk me, and I'm all over social media, even though I think social media is horrible. Actually, I probably shouldn't say that, right? Oh, God.
We all think it.
I know social media is like, it just is a nightmare sometimes. It's so tiring, but I'm everywhere.
Well, everyone, make sure to look out, and I will put those links into the books of recent releases and Enticing, which is upcoming for February 13th. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
You know?